Greetings to you all who are friends and even a few of you who are strangers becoming friends. I thought I would share with you some of my personal journey, which I never quite know how that manifests at times, and I'll just share it with you as I can. As many of you know, I'm interested in how time and space moves. I'm interested in the equinox and solstice and its role in the progressive unfoldment of mankind's opportunity to progress. I'm examining it in my own way pretty thoroughly and will continue to do so because it just feels like there are some amazing opportunities available if I would merge my attention into the yin and yang of the mother and father's family as it corresponds to the cycles and seasons of the year. That sounds like a lot. Well, there's plenty more coming. How the northern and southern hemispheres have their own progressive unfoldment and how it might be possible to share what the Southern Hemisphere is going through, my many friends in the Southern Hemisphere, with my friends in the Northern Hemisphere, and how to share an experience. But I want to take you through just a little bit of something for you to consider and experiment with. Sometimes it feels like that we are all involved in our own ways of progressing. And there are many pathways up the mountain. It feels like some people are going up the mountain, but it feels like a lot of people don't even know there is a mountain and don't care about the progress or personal or spiritual significance that might be available. And then there's just confusion about what this mountain is, or is there a pathway that can be occupied or experimented with? And I'd like to, fast forward from the last few decades of looking for this pathway. And I believe at times I've stepped on this pathway and then stepped into another direction. And then I realized I was actually coming back to the pathway, like crossing over at a particular time. And then to me, much of it is based on the equinox, where the exact center of the sun crosses over the exact line of the equator at an exact moment aligned with the center core of the earth, the equator, the sun, and it has a particular, unusual opportunity. That's why I'm enjoying it so much. Then I find out that the same position comes back in the autumn season of the ability to step on that exact point again, but from a different direction. One is summer into winter, the other one is winter into summer, and I find out that that sweet spot is always in the same location. Now, I know it's challenging to consider that that sweet spot, whatever that sweet spot is, exists every day at sunrise. Meaning right before sunrise is just a moment right before the sun presents its life force on the earth. And then sunset turns out to be that exact same place, accessed from a different direction, in the same way the equinox is always changing directions with the solstice. Now, sounds like a lot, but I'm saying there is a sweet spot. Happens every day. Happens in the middle of the breath, too, by the way, if you want to go that route. So I'm intrigued with how it works. I'm also intrigued with how to help my friends my experimental companions that like to go on this journey, how to experience more of it. Well, if you just for a moment consider that you find that sweet spot and you start to walk along that path. And what you discover is that on every increment of that path, there's fruit. There's an orchard. You're now walking, instead of a forest, you're walking through a fragrant, sweet, delicious orchard. And you go, wow, this is a pretty cool place because there's sweetness on both sides. And you take a little step forward and you find out the next fruit is different from the last fruit. And you keep going forward and you find out every step forward along this path has different fruit. And none of those fruit repeats itself. Now, is that possible? To go down a pathway and the precious gifts of sweet fruit are continuously unfolding? Well, yes, that's how my current experience is that we are always surrounded with precious divine fruit. And I have a hunger to literally taste it because I like using my sensory experiences to smell the fruit and taste the fruit and touch the fruit, hold the fruit, look at its beautiful colors or the flowers that brought it forward. So the fruit is very precious. Now, the interesting part of that is that step forward into the progressively new fruit is actually very much like the hours of the day. And I realized that the step forward into the infinite progression of fruit is mirrored by this wonderfully beautiful figure 8 presenting all the patterns of the day to give me the opportunity to appreciate the existence of divine fruit. So yes, there is a time of the day that is sunrise. And there is the preciousness of sunrise fruit, much like this image, which is an actual picture of the sun. This has been photographically imprinted with a drop of water. And then you find out that the time of the day of sunrise corresponds to the life-giving vitality, of course, of the sun itself. Then you find out that the sunset corresponds with the cooling nature of the eternal nature of water. So water, sunset, fire, sunrise have the ability to both access the sweet spot on the path. Sounds like a lot. But then you find out that every hour of the day, when that water is there at sunset, 2 hours later, there's another form of water, but it's very different than the first 2 hours. So the 2 hours of sunset has a fruit. By the way, it has many forms of fruit inside of it, I find. So many I can't quite count them. Then the hours from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. is a whole nother spectrum of night blooming fruit. A different fragrance, maybe ripened by the moon instead of the sun, and so on and so on. There's just beauty of, so far, a progressive unfoldment of so many precious forms of fruit, it's hard for me to examine them all. And then I find out that from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. is that one special form of fruit, leading always into the special fruit between 10 p.m. and midnight. Yes, there's a special white fruit, if you will. Some of the highest fruit on earth are the white fruit at the very top of that tree. By the way, that white fruit has to do with a whole bunch of skill sets of beauty, imagery, flower, aurora borealis. It just is all kinds of vision. But it also corresponds to the gift of infinity, corresponding in the earthly level to the galaxies, solar systems, universe. Well, you can see that every 2-hour segment ends up with different fruit. And I'm urging you to consider that what it takes is just a moment to pause and ask to experience that fruit. Now, that sounds like a simple thing to do, but it's really not. And I know it seems like that time and space is, if you will, time's passing by. That's not my experience now. Time and space is an exact location somewhere in the universe that it's possible to go back to the past. Mathematically, it's an exact location. We passed by it. So the one that's in motion is really me. I'm the one in motion. So then I go, okay, so if I'm in motion and I can pause intentionally for a moment to appreciate the pristine renewal of sunrise, and then the pristine peace of sunset, that gives me the opportunity to appreciate sunrise and sunset and proceed onward. So this is kind of what I'm doing with it. And I'm also intrigued with how the days are linked to the weeks, and the weeks are linked to the month, and the months are linked together. So yes, 3 months in a season, 6 months between the equinoxes. Then what would it be like if I spent an entire year appreciating fire and water? Yes, there are other elements, earth and air especially, and other ones above that, because the ones above all those, most of them are beyond the senses. They cannot be easily smelled or tasted or touched. There's something beyond the rational boundary of the senses. So I'm interested in how to cooperate with the experience and acquisition of the higher instruments of perception. And each time I go there, there is a gentle reminder to return to the beginning. Meaning that every time I go out, there's always a return. So I find out that the single drop of water, which corresponds to my own existence, is truly the experience of feeling. But then every time I go forward to one of the times of the day, there's always the return back to it and going back out again. So I'm always taking the eternal nature of my own feeling with me as it expands. I don't leave the original experience of peace. So this is where I am in the process, and I'm still examining every step of it. And I know that there are those of you in the southern hemisphere who are just stepping onto the path of water, or if you will, the first month of autumn, or the experience of personal peace or pristine silence, however you wish to start that. I know it's an unusual thing to spend minutes or hours in a day, ideally, considering that your existence came from a pristine, feminine, divine place that was flawless. We came from a place that was truly without flaw or ripple. Then we stepped into matter and we became, if you will, responsibly enmeshed in the experience of our familial DNA. And we started to go through the process we know as a single incarnation of one person moving through a family, moving through a society and a culture, and gradually moving on. So yes, if you're interested in going on this little journey, you can ask some questions about any step of this, and I will honor your question with an answer. So this is me sharing my part of the process. I'm enthralled, I'm dedicated. I'm planning on going through 3 years of cycling this through, because I believe that, like the 3 months in a season, 3 years will give me a greater experience of things I have not yet developed the sensitivity to empirically experience. So thank you for your ongoing patience and your willingness to experiment when you want to. And when you're ready, I will do my best to respond to your understanding. Thanks for now. Talk to you soon.